All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lunch Zone. This month, I decided our theme is animals. And so the first game we're going to play is Goat Simulator, which has been. It is a game that is almost designed for streaming because of how ludicrous it is.
Yeah.
And I'll warn anybody who's really wants to simulate being a goat that I don't think this is particularly accurate.
Is it a bad simulation of being a goat?
Oh, I see what you did there.
I couldn't wait more than a minute to make one bad goat pun.
So here we are. I'm a goat, and I can walk or I can run, and I can headbutt and jump. And so
God, I love dumb shit.
Yeah, you are an agent of destruction in this game. And
Oh no. Oh no.
don't worry, the goat is indestructible.
God.
And I can apparently swim
So
as well. What's the point?
No. What did you get points for that one?
Oh, how many points? I don't know the points I got.
This also, I just love how it embraces just the glitch.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, so good.
Yes. There's a lot I enjoy about this game. Oops. Okay. So you can ragdoll at any point you want. You just press Q and you just kind of fall apart and ragdoll. But
It's like the fainting goats.
whoa, Jesus Christ! And there's also modifiers that you can do, which may explore later. There are goals in this game, although I don't know what happened to that person, but I don't know. There were definitely goals in the last map I had, and I'm not sure if this one just doesn't have it or what's going on, but we'll figure it out here.
Mm-hmm.
I love how explodable the cars are.
See, my one main critique of Goat Simulator is that there's no one that tries to catch you for your wrongdoing. And that was part of the fun in some games where you kind of
where you're an agent of destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean it is very much a game that, and I'll see, I have attached my tongue to this person. It is very much a game that does not try to be realistic. It doesn't really have any goals. It's very much a simulator in that respect. I mean, it's not an accurate simulator, but it gives you a playground, and it gives you potentials for points, which is good because otherwise you wouldn't really have anything to do, right? Well, that's not true. I mean, you would have just the general mayhem that you can cause. How did I not know about this? I don't know. It's been around for, I would say,
6 to 8 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's.
God.
Oh, and you are definitely welcome to play this, by the way. And I think you should be more attuned to it because there's really no skill involved in it.
Thanks.
Well, the only reason I said
I know.
Anyway, so yeah, that's what we're doing today is Goat Simulator. I was curious. I looked up to see if there was any academic articles on Goat Simulator. There is not. There are a few mentions of it in some dissertations, but not enough to really be helpful. And perhaps the most weighty, although I don't even know if that's true, mention of it is in Bogost's I know how to play games.
Sorry.
He has a chapter on simulations, and he mentions this within the context of Surgeon Simulator. He talks about Surgeon Simulator most of the time, and then kind of mentions that Goat Simulator is another example of a simulator that's sort of poking fun at the idea of simulators. So it's it's not really a real meaty discussion of it, but
yeah.
Start a race. Yeah, let's try it. Okay, move, rotate in air. How am I going to do this?
So, I'm thinking about, wait, what? What's he got?
Oh.
I didn't lock anyone out.
Oh, that wasn't anybody. Sorry. I've got a goat on me.
I left the door slightly ajar. Could have been a passive-aggressive closing the door. But, what was I going to say?
Okay, here we go. Whoa! All right.
So, we've talked in the past about a lot of games appearing as, like, sort of innocuous, acultural, apolitical, and stuff like that. And I'm just noticing that this is, like, a fairly, like, well-to-do, not terribly affluent, but, comfortably so area. And I kind of wonder how it would feel destroying things if it wasn't so nice.
Well,
or
hold on.
How does a setting affect?
There is another map. The map that I was on before, let's see. Goatville is
or what about Waste of Space? Like what's...
Oh, let's see that.
Oh, alien. But so let's just like hover over. So we got aliens, some sort of prank.
Goat Z, which is sort of like zombie outbreak.
So when you said Goat C, I got scared for a second. God.
Yes, there is one map where you play in an anus.
What?
No, I'm just kidding!
Talk about different settings.
So here's Goatville. We'll play Goatville. So this is a little less affluent, I would say, less affluent area. And I mean, I don't think it matters because it's really just so over the top that it doesn't. Whoa! I don't know what happened. That it doesn't really matter where you are. And I know there's plugins and things for maps. I believe.
Or I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, right now it just seems like everyone that you're fucking up is just having a somewhat decent day,
Yeah.
And it's not like you're in an area where people are kind of looking downtrodden or having a rough time, and then here you are just kicking them while they're down.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is that's how a goat climbs a ladder. I think it's not really what do I want to say? The game has no compunction or airs about being anything other than just a playground for destruction. Like, there's no... The people don't move, so there's no personality to them. They're really just obstacles in the way. So in that case, I don't think there's... Oh, yeah.
God.
That was a little disappointing, actually. It was kind of... I thought that was a little anticlimactic, although I suppose I didn't actually butt him as fast as I could. Let's see.
Can you reset?
I don't know if I can reset. Maybe he'll respawn up here. Whee!
God.
Uh-oh.
It's funny, I am incredibly squeamish, and usually, like, body parts flopping around would just really... bless, would really gross me out. But this game and the aesthetics of it are not invoking that sort of like visceral reaction.
Well, I think as you said, I mean, there's definitely it embraces the glitchiness, right? So there's the unreality of.
Oh man.
Oh. I have to say, I think what's interesting about this game is it kind of ends up being sort of like Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Which is great.
That.
I love Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I don't know why they haven't gotten more. Why that hasn't had like a resurgence. The skate game. It was so fun.
Yeah. I feel like you could kind of get the skate game in what's that? I should know it. That esport with the flying fucking cars.
Oh, Rocket League?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's true.
But those are far less reactive than the controls for Tony Hawk.
Yes. I mean, by design.
Yeah.
That game is so weird.
This is beautiful. Get the balls on the field.
Did you see the cat on the football field?
Yes. My parents were in town for the weekend. I would never have the TV on otherwise.
Is that borked, or is it still going?
It's a little borked.
Well, just refresh the page.
Okay. It's getting there.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
I wonder what happened, because I used to have like a list of goals or possible things I should be doing, like tasks up there. And I don't know what happened to it. Let's see.
Jumped over container door.
Oh, I see. Walk on your front legs a little.
Just a little.
Perform a successful double front or back flip.
I am bread.
Turn on the toaster and toast some bread. Body goes to hell, mind goes to heaven. Let's see.
Beautiful.
Let's try. Walk on your front. We'll try it.
So just because you invoked Ian Bogos first.
Yes.
And
you say his name 3 times. He
appears and kills you.
Yeah.
Because you're doing work while playing games. So how does this sort of like list where you choose as you go? Like this is very sandboxy.
Yes.
So how does that affect the gameplay differently than Untitled Goose Game, where you have like the laundry list of things to do and a certain order that you have to do it?
Well, I haven't played Untitled Goose Game, but I think it's important to have a list of tasks, even if they're not strictly enforced, because it kind of gives you just the possibility of responsibility, maybe. I think it at the very least seeds some ideas for you, right? And so I think you kind of have to have that, or you don't have to have it, but it's nice to have it.
I think it also gives different ways to play the game.
Yeah.
I just think and why some people watch streams. It's to see how the game is played, to learn.
Yeah.
Because like if I were behind the wheel, I would just be trotting along and headbutting, like not even hauling ass, just like walking and exploring. Because I get motion sickness very easily.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah.
I just want to go at a nice, comfortable rate and explore.
What was I gonna say? what do you think about how this game gather the sacrifices?
Bless.
Okay. What do you think about how this game
Sacrifices.
Embraces glitchiness and well, I guess just that in general. How do you feel about this game embracing that glitchiness?
I love it. I mean, I feel like I think about The Sims a lot, where I would just sit on the computer and just like have fun with every single glitch that happened. Like if their arm went halfway through a wall, it was the funniest shit ever. And I think it's just a kind of sort of sensibility of people who grew up with games before they became like A-list games, where people would spend billions of dollars on producing and consuming them.
Yeah. Do you think there's some amount of artificiality to... Whoa, what the hell just happened?
That was unsatisfying.
Yeah, that was unsatisfying. Do you think there's a bit of artificiality about them leaving those glitches in just to evoke that which other games would try to quash?
I don't think so. There we go. That was so much better. I am going to say I'm getting quite motion sick, so I'm going to like step away a little bit. But I'll talk from this side of the room.
Okay.
And I'll participate in chat. But let me think.
I think it's... I'm not sure if I would agree with that statement. I think if it does anything, it's it removes the idea that they are glitches, right? Which is neither here nor there, really. I mean, that's fine. And in some cases in games, you can make a case that the glitches aren't glitches. They're just a different way of playing the game. And maybe it just kind of embraces that. I don't know.
Let me throw something else out.
Okay.
Just because I can't help but keep comparing this to Untitled Goose Game because, you know, they're both kind of... Like, I mean, I say asinine in a loving way.
Sure.
But they're both asinine games.
Mm-hmm.
They also are games that present themselves as unfinished, in a way. Because you have Untitled Goose Game. Like, it doesn't even have a fucking name.
Yeah,
and
that's
people
true.
are playing it. And this one, like, a glitch and, like, you know... There's like beta players who test out and the gameplay and find those glitches and report them. So there's also a sort of, and I feel like that invokes a certain sort of community in terms of I was there when the game was first released. I was there before the game was a proper game. I feel like if like the Untitled Goose Game was re-released and it had a title and had some more features to it, people would be like flocking to still find the Untitled Goose Game, even with the more refined version out.
Yeah.
Same for Goat Simulator. I think that if this was re-released with the quote-unquote cleaner version without the glitchy aesthetic, I think a lot of people would revert to this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. I think there's a certain... well, I think what you see is that the game... is intentionally, well, like I said, it's intentionally glitchy, and so because of that, it becomes the game. If the game was not glitchy, it would not be Goat Simulator, right?
God. God. I think also the amount of pop culture.
Yeah. Yeah, and that seems, I don't know, that seems a little cheap, but I think it's fine, Walk on your front, I don't know how to walk on my front legs for a while. But, maybe Dolghost is onto something. And does this feel like work?
He's never onto something.
Does this feel like work after a while? I have a problem with that because what that basically means, it seems like what that means for him is that you get bored with it. Which is,
you get bored with everything eventually.
Yeah.
The difference between a game and work is you could put the game down.
Yeah.
But if I have to do X amount of things before I go home, or if I'm scheduled to Y time, well, that ain't the fucking same.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, I love eating. When I feel sick, eating feels like work because I know I have to eat to survive. My stomach's like, bruh.
Well, maybe then this, the tediousness of this doesn't feel like work, because what tends to happen if it becomes tedious is you're not really sure what to do anymore. It becomes unclear you're not as motivated anymore. You don't have those same motivations as you did when you initially started. Mm-hmm. Jump over a painting. I gotta check the controls because I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Forward, back, left, sprint, jump, zoom in, zoom out, attack, lick, BAA. I don't know what that means. Toggle, ragdoll, slow motion, special use.
I also enjoy, so in the beginning of before you even play, there's news and it's just plugging in shit you can buy.
Yeah.
I would love to, I really could just, because I fucking love paratext, just sit for an hour and just read everything about and interact with everything about the game except actually the fucking game. Looking at options and whatever keybinders is and what's a workshop, what DLC is available, who's watching the leaderboard.
Yeah, well, that's a question, is that paratext then? What is a game paratext? Is it the option menu? Is it
I would say so, because it's how you're able to personalize the game. It's how you're able to understand the game better and what's available to it. I would say that the only thing that's not paratext is once you hit start.
So when you're actually playing the game.
Yeah.
So, but there's plenty of menus in Final Fantasy. Are those paratext?
Are you talking about JRPGs?
Yes.
In general, and the level up type things? Or?
Level up, well, let's say, let's say...
You're here for the paratext conversation. So what in the game is paratext?
What in the game is paratext?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, that's a great question.
So, Nathan, go on with what you were saying.
Where should I sit?
I'll move back and you can sit here because...
Whoa, how did I turn into a seal?
Oh, okay, you got motion sit. I was wondering why you were sitting way over in the middle and nowhere. Is the chat up to anything? Not yet.
I've suddenly turned into a seal, and I'm not really sure
is
how.
Is the stream frozen?
It's been doing... I don't think the stream is frozen. I think the
ability to stream the stream is freezing on this computer.
Yes. So getting back to paratext, I think the reason I bring up the menus in JRPGs, and I definitely wouldn't call those paratext. The menus I'm talking about are
item menus.
Yeah, or management where let's say Final Fantasy 12 or 13 where you're managing the tactics of the team or whatever.
I would say that's not paratext.
This is Goat Simulator. I don't know why I'm a seal. I don't know how to get my mask off. But anyway, go ahead.
I was saying I wouldn't consider that sort of stuff paratext because it's all management in order to play the game, and how to effectively, not beef it when you are in the Hall of the Giants.
But by that logic, the Primal Official Strategy Guide to Final Fantasy VII is also not paratext.
That's true.
And I think that it is.
The guide is showing you how to play the game. It's supplemental material.
Yeah.
It's not physically going, okay, I need to level up the rogue because they have faster stats and I need them.
Do you mind if I do research on this quick? I have a curious question about paratext and film.
The only contention I have with what you're saying, I don't have a contention about the paratext I don't want to be a seal anymore, and I don't know how to stop being a seal. The only contention I have about this discussion of paratext is, I see. Okay, I gotcha. Somehow I switched there. The menus are definitely not paratext. The menus in Final Fantasy are definitely not.
Was the memory bad on this game?
Memory?
Is that why you got more RAM? Sorry.
Kelly's a killer.
I would think that the setup menu in games is not part of the paratext. I think that anything that you are doing to interact with the game, either by setting it up, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't think it's that simple. I think it's hard to know what paratext is in a game, because when we think of paratext on some level, we think of it being outside the narrative form, or the form of the game, or the form of the of the text, obviously. But then, what is text in game? I think that's kind of where I'm having a little more difficulty.
So, I have a couple of comments on this. So one, I just did some research. Now, I don't want to say Cornelia Klecker, assistant professor of American Studies in the University of Innsbruck, is perfectly right, but she takes it as a given. They take it as a given that film credits and title sequences are paratextual. Like, it's not even up for debate in this abstract that I just read. It's like just a fact. And if we consider film credits and film title sequences, right, and like the title credits, right, if we consider those to be paratextual, if we take that as we just take that as a at face value. I don't know if we want to.
Yeah.
It's complicated. Like in James Bond, is that paratextual? Like, what's going on in James Bond? I don't ever know what's going on in James Bond. It's just sexist. But if we take that as like the standard, then I think it's really hard to argue that the game menus aren't paratextual. And I'm not arguing for this from my own personal. I'm just saying if we extrapolate that. Oh, time to fly. Can flamingos fly like this? Who cares? Paratext. I think what's interesting about the discussion of paratext in games to me is, like, there's so many... you guys are hitting on something that I think is really important, which is that it's tricky because the paratext is, like, it defines how we talk about something, and we understand that sometimes there's something in the paratext that's going to relate to the regular text, and we're not maybe sure what to do with all these different things. So, for instance, this is my good example of paratext and narrative kind of crushing together. In the Dark Souls games, the only way you can understand the narrative and the world building is through reading item descriptions. It'll be like, this key was used by so-and-so to do such and such, right? And then suddenly you have a better idea of the world because you know about this key. And there's it's an interesting way of telling a narrative, for sure. It's one of the better things about Dark Souls. And Sekiro to a lesser degree. Like, I've written longer papers.
Part of the narrative if you're interacting with those items within the game.
Well, you are interacting with them in the game, but through the paratext of the menu, because the characters within so to me, paratext can also be considered, in a sense, at a higher ordered sense, to be like things that are outside of the gameplay itself, or in the film, outside of the film itself. So the title credits as Klecker shows, right, the characters don't notice right, they're not aware of the title credits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the characters in the game are also not aware of the item description that you're reading or of the menu that you're accessing to adjust what they're wearing.
Well, now hold on a second. Possibly, one could argue that the item description, the character knows the item description or is somehow aware of the item description, and you as the player are only being filled in on it.
I also think if, like, going off of your description of what paratext is, Nathan, because you mentioned, like, it's anything outside of the narrative, but adjusting your gameplay...
I don't want to say it's anything outside of the narrative.
Uh-huh.
I want to say clearly it's anything outside of the text. The difficulty comes into what is the text of a game.
So is the title menu of a game, is that paratextual?
Well,
Where it says, like, new game continue and
Is
everything.
the text the narrative or how we interact with it?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I said it facetiously, but I mean it.
Yeah, well, and, you know, getting... Then the other thing is, like, is statuses and goals, is that text? I would say so. Is on-screen display text. If the credits and the title is not text.
Or like the loading screens with the little...
Yeah, right. Is that text?
Ooh, I've got a great example from a class I took on interactive fiction when I was in undergrad. My professor noted... He was talking about the map in Grand Theft Auto that like kind of is in the corner, and shows you. And he kind of was asking. I don't think we weren't talking about paratext. I don't think explicitly, but he was kind of asking a question about, like, does the map break immersion to some degree? Like, right? Because you're supposed to, you know, just be driving through the city. And his argument was kind of like what you're just saying, which is that no. The map represents the character's knowledge of the city that the character would have, right? Mm-hmm. They understand a top-down perspective. You don't, because you're the player. So the map helps continue immersion, right? It's kind of like it's a very Grusin and Bolter argument, right? Of like hyper-immediacy leading to like, very academic turn. So now we're going to the moon.
We're in the moon. These are like add-on maps.
Okay.
So I'm not really, this is just an extension in terms of making it really goofy.
So like if you're playing this game and it says shakedowns 0 out of 5, we can imagine that the goat is keeping track in its mind, and that information, even though it's kind of paratextual to some degree, because it's outside of what the characters in the game are experiencing, it's still like within the realm of their thoughts and things, but as opposed to like the graphics menu, right? Well,
let's step back a little bit. You're talking about the characters knowing things, and I don't think that is a good way of defining paratext or not paratext, because
that's more diegesis.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So I think we got to be a little bit careful about describing it that way. I think it's tempting to do that in a game because you are supposedly a player, but you as the user sometimes have a lot more information than the character is supposed to have, including something like dying in an area and then going back to the area and knowing what is going to kill you.
Yeah.
The player would not...
Yep.
That's literally what my paper on Sekiro is about. Continue.
The character would not have that, and it's kind of a convention, a necessary convention of the game, right? Is that you are able to gather that knowledge and then redo it, right? So I think I don't know. Paratext, I think, is probably something that is fairly straightforward until you start thinking about it a little bit more, and then it becomes more complex, especially with a sort of postmodern framework. Yeah. I think we could probably categorically say that menus are paratext, or start menus are paratext.
Okay.
As are I guess game management menus. So like
this?
key bindings,
Options.
options.
Okay. Leaderboards, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, leader. But that's a good question.
Could I make so when we first started this discussion? Here was what my gut said, and so like no, everything I've said up to this point has been more arguing devil's advocate.
Yeah. Totally.
I think that there's a fair argument to be made, despite Blecker's probably amazing scholarship that I read the abstract of. That I think anything in the code of the game is the text.
All right. I definitely think there's a fair argument to be made about that. Now, are you even saying like the source code of the text?
Yeah, that's what I'm describing. It's like you download Goat Simulator. It is a file on your computer, or lots of files, really, and lots of assets. Those assets and files and the construction around them, that is the text.
Okay. What about mods?
What about mods? That's a good question. I would say, I suppose, like, the thing is mods take a game out of its native state, right? It's like, it would be like if, like Tyler Durden in Fight Club, right? Inserting pornographic clips into another film, right?
Well, yes and no, because in that case, when that's done, it is done without the. This gets into a death of the author thing. It is done without the sanction of the owners of the intellectual property. This is mods, although not always, but oftentimes, especially now, are done with the knowledge that users will create those modifications.
Okay.
And
I think the green bot. Oh no.
So yeah, maybe, but I'm also kind of playing devil's advocate there. I think, but that does get into how paratext interacts with the death of the author.
In a good way. I'm willing to make a value statement.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Because, well, I mean, I think that is just the statement, and it doesn't need to be elaborated. It interacts with the death of the author, and it's. If you're going to do criticism on a text, especially in newer forms, you need to acknowledge in some way where you're getting your information about the critiques, I think, on something.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. And I think that I think you're right. I think that there's definitely just a death of the author in games in general, because like outside of like the rare Kojima or Suda51 title, right? We don't even attribute games to individuals typically. Like even
I think we're doing it a little well. Yes and no.
Typically.
Well,
I'm saying we can definitely.
I want to push back a little bit with that.
A particular individual's vision, like so, death of the author specifically to me refers to like auteur theory, right?
Yes. Which is kind of I would say was pretty contentious outside of the 60s in film. I think, even though it's still there, it seems a little odd to me that we only credit directors as being the auteurs of film when, scriptwriters and producers have a lot to do with the shape of the film as well. But, that auteur theory still persists. And in some ways, I think it's there in games. You have a fair number of let's call them auteurs in games, whether it's Tim Schafer, Ron Gilbert, and those are somewhat earlier examples. Lord British. I'm trying to think who did Populous and Spore.
Will Wright.
Oh, Will Wright, yeah. But
you had Peter Molyneux.
Peter Molyneux.
He didn't do Spore.
He didn't.
Will Wright did. That's why I got confused.
So you have a few that have sort of when they announce a game, you kind of will say, okay, I've got
Braid?
Was that Jonathan
Toby
Blow?
Fox. Toby Fox is a great example because he literally does all the work himself, right?
Yeah. Well, he's also only. Well, no, I was going to say he only has one game, but that's not true. He has two.
But even if you make one game, it's just you. That's still auteur, right?
But that's not true that he only did it.
He did all the music and he did all the graphics. I know that he probably had assistants and stuff.
I think he
nothing. It's like Obama. You didn't build that, right?
I think he had. I think somebody else did the character designs.
Okay.
But in any case, I mean, he did a fair amount, and is usually recognized as the auteur of that game. So I think there's a fair amount of the idea
that kind of discussion.
Yeah. And it's only really, well, I was going to say only in AAA games, but that's not true either, because there's usually a lead designer, and they might be the ones that get credit for the shape of the game.
What I'm saying is, I'm not trying to say there's no such thing as a lead designer or creative director or whatever the title is in games. Or that the games aren't the vision of particular individuals and that authors don't have intentions with the games. I think all those things are true. Rather, what I was trying to argue was that in the typical discourse of games, we very rarely see the discussion become something like what Roland Barthes was kind of arguing against with Death of the Author, which was like this more auteur theory, like we just take what the author says as a given.
Yeah.
It seems like with games, we're a lot less reticent to just be like, this is messed up, this, you know what I mean, like this thing, and I'm just going to talk about like this is a problem, but they don't reference the author as like the creator of the problem, but typically just like the game itself, like, you know, as a thing, or not. Problem isn't necessarily the right way to frame this. But.
Well, some people do and some people don't, and
okay.
I know I'm complicating this, and
complicating is good. That's what we're here to do.
I think what you'll find problematic arguments, and I think it's worth investigating this, where people will say things like, I remember when Anita Sarkeesian first started her feminist frequency with the games. Obviously, there was a lot of pushback, and some of the pushback, which I totally disagree with, was that she didn't consult the creators of the game to see what their intentions were, whether they were sexist or not, which is of course absurd, because it doesn't matter if their intentions were sexist. That's
or what they say, you know.
Right. That's the whole point, is that these are conventions that reinforce sexism. But there were still people that try to use that essentialism of the author as the clear creator, or the designers as the clear creator of the games, to argue against
segue time.
Yeah, to argue against. Oh, I can't go that way with the segue? That's bull.
I just thought you mistimed it.
No, I don't think I can actually get past those. But anyway, so I think that's still around.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know, it's stupid. I is what it comes down to. I think there's definitely, I mean, we need to, as always, examine Death of the Author. I don't think it's gotten different than it was originally intended to, which is ironic to say, because then that privileges Barth's ownership of the essay Death of the Author.
So aside, like, to kind of go back to mods for a sec, I think my contention would be that mods are a separate text. It's like, you know, it'd be like
fan fiction?
Not fan fiction, because I think fan fiction is an overwriting. Or, well, mods are fan fiction can be a rewriting or an adding on, right? Yeah. Where it doesn't, but it can be an overwriting.
Yeah.
And so now this would be like, if we're going really hardcore into what my master's thesis was on, we could argue that mods are fundamentally feminist. But I don't want to go there right now. I think mods overwrite the text, right? The text is still there, right? Because you can't, like, for instance, you can't play Dota All-Stars on Warcraft 3 without having Warcraft 3, right? Now you can, kind of. But that's because it's in the source engine, and that's a whole nother thing. And so, to me, mods, like, overwrite something. And so, they're a text in of themselves. Like, if I have Skyrim and I modded it with X, Y, and Z, I have like overwritten Skyrim, right?
No.
And thus changed the text. Why do you think it's not?
I don't think you've overwritten it. I think if you're making a distinction in...
Wait, what do you think I mean when I say overwritten? I think that
Well, let's talk about fan fiction. What
Okay.
What are the distinctions? Because you made a distinction in fan fiction between overwriting versus... Did you say-
rewriting or extending.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, so talk about how different fan fictions do
Right.
different things.
So overwriting would be fan fiction that takes the text as it is and inserts new things. So like I'm thinking like this is a bad example of maybe fan fiction, but a good example of overwriting would be where like they took like someone took Jane Austen's work 10 years ago and turned it into like about zombies by like rewriting parts of it.
Okay.
Like that's overwriting, right? Because you're still using this core text.
Mm-hmm.
Rewriting might be telling the same thing that happened in the text, but from another perspective. So you're creating a new work, but it's based on what was there in the first place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're rewriting an event.
Mm-hmm.
And then extending is probably the vast majority of fan fiction, which is where you are just whole cloth, wholesale, like this is all new stuff. Maybe it's with the characters, maybe it takes place before, during, or after what was going on in the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really just extension of like my personal fantasy related to this particular thing. So like, you know, suddenly Harry and Ron are in a relationship, right? And it's like post, you know, they're I don't know. I don't read much fan fiction, but do you get like do those three distinctions?
No,
make
yeah,
sense?
that makes a lot of sense.
And if we were being really, if we were creating like a systematic theology of fan fiction, we could probably come up with more definitions.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sub definitions within that and distinctions. But okay, then that makes sense. Then mods, I would agree for the most part are overwriting. Although there are some, what would you consider a mod that is a total conversion that just uses the engine, basically, to create a completely different map with completely different assets?
Pokemon Go.
You what?
Well, how does Pokemon Go do this?
Pokemon Go used the same maps from a previous server and just reskinned it for Pokemon.
Oh no!
Yeah,
I
And it's not the same, but
I think you're talking about like Counter-Strike and Half-Life, right?
Yeah.
Or like Dota All-Stars and Warcraft 3, right? Where like it's like that. I think it's really tricky and interesting. The funny thing is this was birthed from talking about the difference between text and paratext and describing the game as a text. Mm-hmm. And now we're really complicating what is the text, which is good. I personally, I would think of them as still overwriting the game. But I think the thing is we need to have a conceptualization of overwriting that allows for the creation of new text, right? So an overwritten text is a new text. It's like Dota All-Stars is a new text overwriting Warcraft 3, right? And then it's like that's my conceptualization of overwriting something.
Yeah.
But maybe that's not a fair definition of overwriting.
Well, I think that works with your definition of the text of a game being the code, and the assets, because the code, well. The code for the engine is still there, although the engine may not necessarily have been developed in-house. It may have been augmented in-house, or some engines are licensed and then they're changed in-house for the development to better suit the game, right? So I don't know how that works, because then it's like, for instance, like a physics engine, right? Most people are not creating their own physics engine when they make a game. But is the physics engine textual to each individual game that uses it?
Mm-hmm. Well, that creates another interesting set of things to discuss, which is like if we're thinking about film, and I am going to bring this back to what you just said, so I'm not like suddenly changing the if I'm using like the red eye, which is like the camera that's being used, I think that's what it's called, and most like Marvel, like the big AAA AAA movies, like the studio productions,
Yeah.
like Disney and stuff. If the red eye is used in like multiple films, right? Is that like like the physics engine being used in multiple games, right?
I don't know. You tell me, because
It's a tool. So do we consider the physics engine as it is part of the code? This is what gets tricky.
Yeah.
So it's part of the text, but so to some degree is the camera that was used to make a film.
no,
And
the output of it is part of the text.
Yes.
Why can't I go up here anymore?
Your head is caught in the thing, of course.
So the license needs to be. This is complicating your
Text thing, yeah.
Yeah,
in a good way.
Yeah, the licensed engines are part of what you download or what you have on your computer. Or let's just say whatever the game interacts with. Because sometimes there may be assets for a game that are not stored locally; they're in the cloud or something like that, right? And we don't want to not include those as part of the text.
Yeah.
But for movies, you don't necessarily. You get the output of those tools, but you don't get the tools themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not licensed. I don't know, but maybe we could make. Yeah, because
the
it's.
thing is the movie creators are not the ones making the red eye cameras. Like that's a separate company.
That I think that's the case with what he's describing with the physics engine.
Yeah, that's what I
Like,
mean. Like
Epic Games makes the Epic. What's it called? What's the Epic Games one? That's like used in a lot of games. That's
Unity, is that?
Yeah. Well, there's you use Unity as the example. Like Unity is a game creation engine or a physics engine that you map onto your game and stuff like that. And so when you use that, you like license it out. And so like the question is that part of the text, the physics engine, even though it's being used from another game? My contention would be an emphatic yes.
Okay.
Because like it's in, if I just consider the text to be all the code that's in the code. Yes, it was made by someone else, but that just to me that more complicates our idea of auteur theory than it does complicate the idea of the game as a text. It's weird because the game is in an amalgamation of a bunch of text, but we've already gone through that. For instance, with music, samples other music all the time, right? And so like it becomes like, is this rap song right? Like samples, something. Is this Drake song? And like yes, because it is a text on its own.
It reappropriates.
And it has
it,
other texts in it as well.
Yeah.
And the physics engine is just another text.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's get back to Goat Simulator.
I want you guys to beat that up. That guy who's on the billboard. He's lazy.
I'm going up there.
I have my boomer glasses on. That lazy millennial. No.
I'll get back up there. Don't worry. So to maybe get back to Goat Simulator, I think this is another good example of that because this game has been extended a lot with modifications that are blessed by the creators, right?
It feels like a mod, even just like the core gameplay.
Yeah. It's like Gary's
Got
mod.
him. Yeah, Gary's mod.
Yeah. Like I don't know if this part was part of the original game.
Is this DLC or just like a fan created mod?
Well, I didn't download any DLC.
Okay.
So I would assume that this is, and I didn't download a fan created mod, so I assume this was like an update, right?
Okay.
Well, there's another example, right? Like integrating text. Well,
yeah.
Which version of the text are you talking about, right?
It gets very difficult when you're me and an esports scholar to talk about text sometimes because they're constantly changing.
Yeah. Well, I think.
Pod Racer.
Lick Pod Racer. Okay. How do I use the Pod Racer? Oh, there it is. Yeah, actually, this was kind of something that I had been interested in, but never really developed for classification for library science because this isn't really possible at this point. It doesn't really matter. But for organization of information, what happens when you when you buy a game, is it the same game for classification purposes when you integrate a mod into it, right? If you're a library, say, and we're talking about, let's be ideal here. You're a library and you're archiving games, and you have access to actually doing that. You would want to ensure that the games that you're archiving, the version is recorded while you're doing that.
Yeah.
And so I think you may want to have separate entries for the different versions that you have so that you can archive them properly, and if somebody says, I want this version of the game,
A First Stone or whatever.
yeah, then you can go and acquire that for them.
This becomes impossible with the games as service model.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's not say impossible. It just becomes a lot more complicated because... And part of that is the distribution of games.
Can I make just a small side argument
Sure.
about why I think it becomes nearly impossible? You're right. Impossible maybe is a little bit of an overstatement. But I'd like to think about all the resources that had to go in to make World of Warcraft Classic, right?
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't just open up a server of WoW Classic because it had actually been lost because they've constantly been overwriting WoW and creating new versions of WoW over the years. So like recreating the game requires actually a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
Like not just, we'll just make a server, right? It's like, because they actually lose that information over time.
Well, that's their fault. And I think
yes,
that...
I agree.
And they're not working with people to rectify that problem. You know, to me, it's very much like the beginning of film where we lost so much film and we lost so much television because nobody bothered to keep it around, you know. But it's an exponential problem at this point. You know, we are in an era of game making that is in the mainstream. It's been in the mainstream for a while, and we haven't bothered to keep up with archiving it. And it's just freaking ridiculous. And I think it's really problematic. And in 100 years, when we're trying to come up with a history of games, we're just going to have we're going to have to rely on articles that were created during the time that the games were released.
Well, for some games, right, it depends on the title. It's like Witcher 3 we'll still have in 100 years, right?
I'm talking about, let's say I want to study the rollout of, say, Assassin's Creed. What's the Revolution or the French one?
Assassin's Creed. I don't remember. I don't follow that series particularly well.
Well, the French one that was released had terrible graphical problems, right? And it was just lambasted because of that. And so let's say you want to study the rollout of that and the release of it and what people experienced when they initially got it. You're going to have to rely on articles because the actual release is gone. You know, it's like, oh God, what's the name of that? There was that like 6-hour silent movie by
Andy Warhol?
No, by is it Greed? I think it's Greed. There was like a 6-hour cut that he made. Do you know who I'm talking about?
No, I'm sorry.
I'd have to look it up.
What's the time frame? Like the era?
Oh, it's silent film era,
Okay.
like the 20s or something. But he had made a 6-hour cut, and then everybody complained about it, so he decided to cut it down, and people
lost
want
the 6-hour cut.
Yeah, well, the 6-hour cut's gone.
Like with Magnificent Ambersons and Orson Welles.
Oh yeah, that's another good example of all that we've lost because they decided to overwrite it. I don't know. I mean, I just think it's really unfortunate from a information gathering, what the heck, standpoint. Oh, I have
You have antlers.
No, I have I have an alien on my
Looks
face.
like it's from Half-Life or something.
Yeah.
It is one. So I'm gonna head out to get to
okay.
my office hours.
Well, thanks for everybody. Thank you for coming. Next week, to continue the animal theme, I think I'll do. Shit, man, I forgot.
Wait, when is the Chancellor coming? Is it next week or is it the week
2
after?
weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
20th.
Are we still planning on Smash, or are we gonna do some? Are we gonna do Goose Game? Is kind of what you were
Well,
inferring over Slack.
I didn't realize that that Smash had been decided.
I think it had just been discussed. I don't know if we. I think it was a.
I thought it was decided because there was the Smash team on campus that we were talking about getting involved.
Okay.
But, I mean, I have no stake. It's more like I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page.
Yeah.
Because I'm fine with either.
But anyway, next week I want to do. It's the Dung Beetle game. What the hell is the name of that? Doesn't matter. I'm sorry. Bye.
Bye. Sorry that I.